The CEO of Anthropic, the one who builds Claude, spent most of 2025 telling anyone who would listen that AI was going to wipe out 50% of the white-collar jobs, massive unemployment, and that the workforce as we know it, it'd be done. And then in May, Fortune ran a headline that really made me stop. Both Sam Altman and Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, both of them were walking back their whole claims that there is going to be an AI jobs apocalypse. And what I really love is that Sam Altman goes, hey, we were pretty wrong about that. On June the 12th, a linked internal memo from Meta, Mark Zuckerberg said that after a year of mass layoffs at Meta, he told employees, hey, we probably made some mistakes, and guess what? We're going to continue to make more. Now, over the span of 3 weeks, we have had 3 CEOs from 3 companies do 3 walkbacks. So that really just kind of leads me to a question that I've been asking for a while. If the guys who built the thing and the ones who have been doing the layoffs, if they're all admitting that they got it wrong, what is actually driving these AI cuts? Because it's not AI. Welcome to the channel. I am Trent Cotton, the Human Capitalist. I've noticed that there is a big difference between HR business practices and how business actually gets done. I've spent over 20 years in HR helping the C-suite rebuild their organization while the world around them shifted. I've designed this channel to be an intelligence briefing on the business of people. So, if you're a CEO, board member, or a CHRO looking for the signal in the noise, welcome to the channel. Now, let's get to work. Now, according to Challenger Gray and Christmas, AI is now the single leading reason that companies cite for layoffs. Nearly 40% of the job cuts announced in May were attributed to AI. Every earnings call, every press release, every LinkedIn post from a CEO, they're all pointing at the same thing. AI made me do it. Now, in this video, I want to tell you what I really think is going on, and it's not what you are hearing in the media. All right, before we get into it, I want to talk about a bill that's been moving, I guess if you call moving since June of last year. It's been moving through Congress and it's bipartisan. And what it's trying to do is to create a mandatory reporting cycle so that we can actually measure how many jobs are being lost to AI versus other factors. The fact that we need legislation should also tell you something. We don't have clean data. Companies can say we're laying off because of AI, and no one can prove otherwise nor hold them accountable. I did a full breakdown of what this bill actually goes over in a video that I'll drop in the description, but the short of it is the whole AI made us do it is the perfect corporate alibi because there's no forensic infrastructure to challenge it. This bill can change that. And look, all of us are feeling it. A recent poll that came out in June said that 76% of Americans think that businesses aren't being transparent about their AI use, and another 74% think that the government isn't regulating it enough. People can sense the BS. They just don't have the data to be able to prove it. So now let's talk about what's going on underneath those cuts. Here's what I've been seeing for years and what AI has now made it absolutely impossible to hide. We have built organizations wrong for decades. The measure of a leader's importance and influence and political capital in a company was not based on their impact or their contribution to the bottom line. It was based on their headcount. I want you to go back and think over the last several years, how many times have you heard X is responsible for this number of FTEs, so we should take their concerns into account? They should have a greater voice because they have the largest headcount department. When was the last time that you heard someone say that individual, their department actually drives 30% of our value creation? They should have a louder voice in the room. Probably never, because we never built the systems to measure that. We only measured bodies. So over time, what did rational, ambitious leaders do? They hired, they built these empires. More people meant more political capital and more influence. Headcount became the currency of corporate politics, and no one called it for what it was. So fast forward to present day, AI shows up, and then suddenly companies are racing to say AI in their earnings meetings without actually sitting down and understanding the value creation at the employee and departmental level. If you just throw AI on a process that was built on the scaffolding of more people equals more work and productivity without actually doing the value analysis that I'm going to encourage you to do, you're making a very expensive mistake. And for the love of God and all things holy, can we please, please stop equating being busy with being productive, because it's never the case. Now, let's look at Meta as an example. Here's a timeline: 3,600 job cuts last year, another 1,000 after one of their labs lost 73 billion or some ungodly number, several hundred more layoffs across sales, recruitings, and ops. Then in April, they began tracking their employees, including things like mouse movements and keystrokes to be able to train their agents. And then in May, they cut another 8,000 jobs while reassigning 7,000 into AI roles at the same time. This is not a value creation strategy. This is a company that is restructuring in public in real time and admitting, in the CEO's own words, that it's making mistakes and it's going to continue to make them. Now, do you always have a 100% chance of getting a layoff right? Absolutely not. Lord knows I didn't have that track record. But there's a better, more refined way to do it that's actually driven on value creation and not just adding money to the bottom line. And what we're seeing play out in the media is all of these companies are making the same mistake. They're just doing it now with AI because they don't understand where value is created in their organization. I recently came across Cameron Herold. He's the founder of the COO Alliance, and he also built 1-800 Got Junk to $100 million valuation. And he has this principle that roughly 50% of a company's output is generated by the square root of its total employees. So let that land for a second. If you have 100 employees, roughly 10 of them are producing half of your output, according to Cameron. 400 employees, that means 20 people. And if you have 10,000, that's roughly 100 people are carrying the company on their backs. So I have been absolutely obsessed about high performance teams my entire career, even before I got into HR. I've researched it, I've read about it, I've lived it. Hell, I even wrote a book about it. Now, what Cameron gave me was an equation. This equation turns organizational theory into a very uncomfortable conversation that every leadership team needs to begin to have. So, when you put the Herold and the Pareto principle together, the implication is pretty damning. You could probably achieve the same results with half of your current workforce, but that's only if you knew which half to keep and if you have built the right structures around them and you have stopped confusing activity with output. This is not a layoff argument. This is where I want to introduce value architecture. Now, here's where AI actually enters the story legitimately. Your top performers are still buried in mundane, non value adding work. Think research, reports that no one reads, status updates, and process compliance. All of those things eat roughly, best estimate, 40% of someone's day, and they produce nothing that required the focus and the attention of your top talent. This is where AI can really earn its keep, not by replacing your best people, but by liberating them and augmenting them. So let's think about your top sales performer as an example. Right now, they're spending hours researching an account, pulling backgrounds, running activity reports. But if you had the right AI and augmentation play, they could spend 10% of their role on the things that only the human can do, and then let AI and automation handle the rest. This is the difference between Tony Stark and Tony Stark with Jarvis. Yes, I know I'm using Iron Man as an example, but it's a great one. It's the same person, same drive, same instincts, but now Tony is a superhuman because he's been able to augment himself and he's removing the drag and focusing on only the things that a human can do. And in your organization, that's what's going to drive the real output and the real value. So the real AI story is not about displacement. It's actually about targeted amplification, but only if you're driving the conversation. So before AI even came into the picture, the whole value creation and being able to identify that was a blind spot for HR. Part of it was because HR didn't take the initiative to really get into the business and understand at a department level and even at an employee level what drove the business KPIs. That's the first problem. So you need to fix that part first. But once you have that, then you can start really getting in and using what I call the human capitalist value matrix. So this problem of extra headcount drives more outcome. It's been around for a long time. AI is just amplifying the fact that, hey, maybe we've been doing this wrong. So let me help you figure out where value is being created almost down to an employee level, because that's what needs to drive what AI needs to do, where you need to augment, and what is truly human. So I want you to think of four quadrants. Okay. On the Y axis, you have the value to the organization, so high and low. And then on the X axis, you have focus required, high and low. The goal for every leader and for every team and every department in the organization is that 80% of a human's time is spent on the top half of that quadrant. So now let's walk through each different quadrant. Let's start with the upper left. You have high value and low focus. These are things that still drive value in the organization, but do not need a lot of human oversight. Think of ways that you can automate and scale this. I always like to give an example from early in my career. I would pull reports from different financial terminals. It did all of the work. I just came in, slapped a little bit of analysis, and sent it out to my clients. That was very high value for the organization because it positioned me as an SME handling the client's portfolio, but it didn't take a lot of focus for me. The real focus came from the automation that was going on by giving me all of the data. It's a perfect example of a left quadrant and how you can automate and accelerate by decreasing the amount of time that the human is spending actually pulling the work together because it's still high value. It just requires a little bit less focus. Now let's talk about the upper right hand quadrant. This is high value, high focus. So these are the things that drive the most value in your organization that require the most amount of focus from the human. This is where the money is. Think strategy, go to market plans, things that only a human can do. If we were to look at sales, this is the relationship building. This is taking all the information from research and creating a strategy to get deeper penetration into the market. There are some things that AI and automation can do to help accelerate that, but the real work and the real value is driven by the human. So, again, just for clarification, we want most of our organization working in those upper two quadrants. Now, let's talk about the bottom two quadrants. So, whenever I show this matrix, a lot of times people immediately zero in on the low value, low focus work. Makes sense, kind of where our brains work. But this is where you should be asking the questions, why are we doing this? If it is a report that requires low focus and brings low value, why are we sending the report out in the first place? And if we need to, if we absolutely have to continue to send it out, then that's where you need to automate, delegate, or even consider making it self-service. This should not occupy more than 5% of anyone's workday. All right, let's talk about the last quadrant. This is what I call the danger zone. This is low value, high focus required. If something or someone sits in that bottom right hand quadrant, you either radically redesign it, you sunset it, or you stop pretending that it is strategic. And let me go ahead and warn you, you're going to get a lot of resistance. I've found that a lot of people in the organization, they like to hide in this quadrant because they think being busy equals being productive. This is where the value matrix really comes in and calls BS on that. So, as you can see from the quadrants, what's happening is that what companies are calling AI driven cuts right now, they're cutting from the wrong quadrants because they haven't done the analysis. Without this framework, you're just looking for a cover to be able to make the cuts because they don't really make sense. So, whenever I read the headlines, one of the first questions I have is where in the hell are the CHROs in all of this? Well, if my experience tells me anything, I think that most of them are sitting in either reactive or rah-rah mode. On the reactive mode, they're not in tune with the business. They've been relegated to reacting to what the rest of the C suite decides, and they're not the tip of the spear. They're not driving these conversations and helping drive these decisions. They're the last to know. And then you have the rah rah club. They over rotate on culture and surveys and feel goods, not as a strategy to protect and retain the high performers, but to make the environment fun. Now, look, culture matters, but it is not the whole job. Because if that's all you focus on and then you focus the rest of your time on policies, you just become the police and you're not becoming like the leading scientist. And let's face it, police react to incidents, scientists design the future. Which one do you want to be? So now let's go back to the Meta leaked memo. They're promising more stability. They're pulling back on some of the manager oversight increases, and they're promising to find new roles for the employees that they assign to train AI models. They're investing in more offsites and hackathons to help try to rebuild trust. That's the right instinct, but notice when it showed up after the layoffs, after the leaked memo, after the trust was already gone. That is reskilling and stewardship done in reverse. That's what it looks like whenever a CHRO function does damage control instead of leading the value creation conversation before the cuts even happen. Now, in the Modern CHRO series, I state that the new CHRO, they're going to have to operate in five mindsets: the architect, engineer, the scientist, the COO, and the coach. And in fact, that is the foundation of my new upcoming book called The Futurist. I think actually, no. I know that the profession has to evolve and it needs to start doing it now because the decisions being made without the futurist CHRO with these five mindsets, if they're not leading that value creation discussion and then having the reorg and the layoff discussion after, it's going to cost their companies millions of dollars and they're going to lose their best people. And the problem is, they won't even see it until it's too late. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and warn you this next piece is probably going to come off a little hot, and I'm not going to apologize for it because whenever I'm on stage and I am talking about layoffs, I don't say we lost 62,000 jobs in the market last year because that doesn't really take into account the personal aspect of it. What we should be saying is that 62,000 people's lives were affected by a layoff last year because what's really happening is that we're not thinking about the employees. Because, yes, employees get paid for a job, but you and I both know that many of them have given far more than what their wage provided them. They've covered gaps. They've stayed late. They've carried institutional knowledge. They've helped train other people without being compensated for it. They have put their time, investment, blood, sweat, and tears at the expense of the time that they could have been spending with their loved ones to try and move your company forward. To arbitrarily just throw that away, to release people into the market without taking the effort to reskill them, either for your organization or for the future to remain relevant in the workforce, I want you to hear me say this. That is malpractice. And let me talk to the CHROs. You owe it to the workforce that helped build the company to get it to the point where it is now to reinvest them, to retrain them, to make them relevant for what's coming. If you're not doing that, and if your organization is not doing that or prioritizing that, you're not being a good steward of society. You're taking what the workforce gave you, calling it spent, and then dumping the problem on everyone else to clean up. And let me be blunt by saying that is not leadership. That is abdication. Okay, let me step off my soapbox. I'm a little passionate about that topic, but I do want to say I understand AI is real, transformation is real, and I'm not here to tell you that nothing is going to change. But the companies that come out ahead are not going to be the ones that cut the fastest. They're going to be the ones who finally get honest about where the value actually is created and should be protected. And they're going to make very strategic decisions to protect it, amplify it, accelerate it, and invest in the people who drove it. Now, the others who are just swapping headcount for a press release, well, let's see what they're going to be doing in the next 18 months. I don't think it's going to go well for them. And my call to anyone in HR and especially CHROs, it's time to lead the conversation, not react to it, not clean up after it, not cheerlead it. It's time to lead it. So I hope this video helped clear up some of the questions as to, is AI really driving the cuts? The answer is we don't know because we don't have any kind of clean data. Hopefully that will change in the near future. If you're interested in learning more about the law, I will drop a link to the video in the description. Also, if you'd like to stay up to date on my upcoming book, The Futurist, I will drop a link in the description for you to sign up and get updates. I hope to have that out by the end of the year. I am Trent Cotton, your human capitalist, and you should invest in yourself because no one's going to do it quite like you do.